From The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to Edward Scissorhands to Poor Things, German expressionist art has influenced films from the early 1900s and is still influencing films today. One of those films is The Substance. The Substance was released in September 2024 and directed by Coralie Fajar. Starring Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley and Dennis Quaid, it is a body horror film that follows a celebrity's fading fame and her journey to remain popular and beautiful in the media, then creating her quote-unquote perfect self that isn't without its own problems. With the intense visual style, acting, set design and music,
The New Year's Eve Show.
It shows the collapse of the mind and how the intense struggle to stay with the beauty standards breaks a person down. The film begins with the creation of a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, introducing the main character Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore. We watch in a montage as the fame and popularity of her star depletes, with less people visiting it and soon becoming something that is merely there, unnoticed. A crack runs through the star, ruining the so-called perfect gloss, and perhaps referencing the separation that Elizabeth goes through due to the substance. With non-diegetic music coming in, we cut to Elizabeth and her backup dancers stomping their feet under the bright, unnatural lights of a TV set. The artificial world is clean, clinically clean, with no windows to the outside world and the proportions of the room making it feel both empty and claustrophobic. As the lights cut and everyone returns to the quote-unquote real world, Elizabeth leaves the set, walking into a hallway that is equally unsettling. The walls are painted an unnatural bright orange, and the spanning walls are lined with large photographs of Elizabeth from her youth on the show. The lights shine artificially bright, similar to the TV set, yet now filled with less people. As she walks, people pass by, wishing her a happy birthday, further reminding her of her increasing age. The hallway continues, more people passing her. It feels again empty. Lifeless, vast, yet claustrophobic at the same time. With the posters of herself spanning from floor to ceiling and the passers-by reminding her of her age, she feels watched and observed, still wanting to be in the limelight but slowly fading into the background. Within a bathroom, given the same clinical, unused look as the rest of the locations, we have a close-up shot of her manager on the phone, voicing his opinions on who should be brought in to replace Elizabeth on screen. We then cut to a lunch meeting between her and her manager, treated with extreme close-ups, furthering the feel of claustrophobia and unease as he eats messily, talking with food in his mouth. As he continues eating, the sound occasionally distorts, giving us even closer shots of him eating, his mouth, his fingers over the food, images that aren't usually shown in TV and movies, but are used to unsettle the audience with the new and unusual display for the film.
The thing that impressed me the most in the editing was how much this shrimp scene made people uncomfortable, to make them feel so unwell. And I learned on my first feature that when there is a scene that makes everyone uncomfortable and that everyone asks you to cut or to do differently, it's most of the time because there is something very powerful in that scene that you have to stick to.
It cuts between Elizabeth and her manager, his once clean look smothered with food, as Elizabeth sits across from him, not eating, and therefore keeping her clinically clean look unruined. Following a car crash that happens as she drives home, we sit in a doctor's office, framed with the camera close to her face and the doctor standing behind her. As the camera focuses on Elizabeth, we now see her Hollywood gloss is ruined, her mascara smudged down her eyes. Once again being reminded of her birthday by the doctor, she breaks down crying, her once solid, unwavering public image breaking, revealing how she is truly feeling. The camera focuses on her face, now showing every wrinkle caused by time, the redness of her nose from crying, and the deeper ruin of her makeup. The shots are used to display to the audience something that tends to only happen in private, away from the watchful eye of the public or the audience. As she steps outside, she is lost in towering buildings, their imposing height covering her completely. The world outside the sets, or her home, are intentionally distorted versions of reality, showing tall buildings that everyone has seen, but framing them in a way that is unnatural to the human experience. That, similar of a movie set. Her world feels to her relentlessly observed, with people everywhere recognising her fame, the fame she gained with her youth. Yet again, she's reminded of her age and the slowly fading fame. She returns home to her apartment, and we are met with the same bright, artificial lighting and a clean look to everything, with no evidence that it has actually been lived in. There is a singular window looking out into the world. It has an unnatural glow, with a long span like that of a cinema screen, as if the world is being projected onto it. We are now met with her bathroom, the bright white tile repeating the square pattern all throughout, similar to the tiles in the bathrooms in the studio and the tall fake windows on the filming set. It's like she's trapped in the performance, constantly at risk of being watched and scrutinised. The movie is a culmination of many different visual styles, with the tall, unnatural buildings and sets similar to German expressionist films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, with rhythmic visual editing like French impressionist films, and many more. This combination of styles is due to the accessibility of films from all around the world from any time period, due to modern media and streaming, which has given modern films the inspiration that directors from years ago, for example the 1920s, didn't have access to. As she searches for the substance, the key to being young, beautiful and popular again, we are met with the same visual style, that like German expressionism, with the imposing buildings making her world feel clinical, empty, devoid of people, yet claustrophobic and watchful at the same time. Whilst the substance doesn't use exact techniques that the expressionist films used, the painted on deep shadows or erratic acting of characters, which was done at the time due to lack of access to resources. For example, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari used the set design to place the viewer into the psychological landscapes of the characters, which is done here, but with a modern take, having access to the resources in the modern day. As she approaches the substance, the world begins to break, losing the clinical cleanliness and met with dirt, grime, litter and graffiti. Yet as she enters the room to retrieve it, the world is back to gloss of the sets. The bright white tiles and untouched look creating unease again, both to the audience and to Elizabeth. Elizabeth constantly looks around, observing her surroundings, perhaps in fear of being seen, noticed, wrangled for being a celebrity. After injecting the substance, a bright green liquid which could be in reference to Reanimator 1985, we watch as Elizabeth writhes around in pain, her body changing, becoming two, as described before. This could link to the idea that beauty is pain, that to remain beautiful you must have surgeries, implants, discipline and pain to remain beautiful, perfect and wanted. We watch her pupils separate, like cells during mitosis. Her skin bubbles and bulges unnaturally, preparing for the separation of her and her quote-unquote perfect self. This scene is similar to the scene in Gremlins 1984, where Gizmo comes into contact with water and his body begins bubbling and separates, then becoming a separate entity. The substance has many references to other films. As I have already mentioned, Gremlins, but with many other films too. For example, the carpet in the hallway of this studio could be seen as a reference to The Shining, as well as another scene shown later. A scene in which Elizabeth's other self's lips are shown on a TV screen in reference to Videodrome 1983. Returning to the substance, Elizabeth's back begins splitting open, revealing her other self. The exaggerated body horror is meant to both unsettle and enthrall the audience, showing things that are unlikely to happen realistically, further linking to the movie set feel of the film. As the other self, played by Margaret Qualley, emerges from Elizabeth, the shots change, now as the point of view of this other self. She emerges, fully realised on who she is and what she must do, a mere copy, separation of Elizabeth, a younger and better self. Standing in the mirror, she admires herself, her naked body, youthful and full of life. The other self, called Sue, a name discovered soon, begins repairing and stitching Elizabeth's unconscious body, as if already knowing what she must do. Again, the intense body horror causing unease in the audience. The camera slowly pulls out of the bathroom, showing how the untouched cleanliness is now ruined. with Elizabeth's body and blood now covering a decent area of the floor. Sue sits down, breathing deeply, coming to terms with what just happened. I should note here that Elizabeth and Sue are supposedly the same person, one brain and body separated into two. However, as the movie continues, it's as if Sue is now her own separate being, not part of Elizabeth, but living from her body. The cameras circle around Sue, with an unrealistic bright light and gloss over the lens, presenting her as if she is a mannequin, an object only for the visual pleasure of the audience. Sue then stands in front of a wall of TV screens, watching the recording of herself saying her name. This scene with the TVs is in reference to Videodrome, as mentioned before. The rhythmic editing style, similar to French Impressionist movies, again mentioned before, is evident here too. The sitting of assistants, the lighting of a cigarette, the editing is subtle and unnoticed by many of the average viewers, but this inspiration brings together styles from all over the world from many different periods of film. We cut to a rhythmic montage as Sue lives her life, the 7 days before she must switch, mentioned when Elizabeth took the substance. The montage shows Sue practicing her dancing for the show, clearing out Elizabeth's things from the apartment, living her life separately from Elizabeth. As the switch happens, Elizabeth returns to life as Sue becomes inanimate on the bathroom floor. Elizabeth screams in pain, lingering from the separation that happened. She admires Sue's body, brushing her hair aside like a mother caring for a child. This could link to when Sue mentions having to care for a sick mother every other week.
I have to be out of town every other week to take care of my mother. Very sick.
When we return to Elizabeth, the apartment begins to look lived in, slowly losing the clinical clean that it had before. Dishes on the side, food being cooked, and the odd speckle of dirt on the bathroom tile. She walks through the city, her movements more jagged and erratic than before, and as she returns to the studio, she watches her portraits being removed, making it emptier and vaster, yet still feeling like the walls are closing in. She then spots her manager, or ex-manager, in the hall. As he approaches her, the camera switches between him walking and a close-up of Elizabeth's face. The entire time his footsteps are heard, lasting around 10 seconds as he approaches her. This unbreaking sequence is done purposefully, to unease the audience again, making them sit with the singular sound of his footsteps until he begins talking.
Where have you been?
The shot again returns to him walking down the hall, another unbreaking 10-second shot as he walks away, his footsteps echoing through the now empty hallway. Within the apartment, Elizabeth fills in a calendar on the days that it's her or Sue in control. The white boxes of the calendar mimicking the white tile of the bathroom as the scenes fade in and out of shots of Sue's unconscious body on the bathroom floor. As Elizabeth retrieves the refill kit, the grimy, unpolished settings become more familiar to Elizabeth and to the audience. Switching back to Sue, the scenes are more vibrant and lively. The music is upbeat, the colours are more saturated, and the image of Sue is more sexual, with repeated images of her body rather than her face. As Sue observes the apartment, it begins to look more lived in. Indentations on the armchair where Elizabeth sat, and the TV is still playing infomercials that she was watching before the switch to Sue. As Sue's eyes meet a poster of Elizabeth, taken under studio lights while she was on set, it cuts to a shot of Elizabeth, currently unconscious on the bathroom floor, naked, without makeup, something not often seen compared to the gloss and glam of the TV industry. Sue stands in the bathroom doorway, looking down at Elizabeth's body as merely an inconvenience, in comparison to where Elizabeth looked over Sue's body, ensuring she's fine. As Sue encounters the neighbour, he is enthralled, unable to speak due to her innate beauty. He bends to her will, allowing her to do whatever she wants, due to her looks and her sexuality. The shot then returns to inside the apartment, with the large photograph of Elizabeth, broken from an earlier scene, looking out to an even bigger billboard of Sue, bright and unnatural, looking directly into the apartment. Sue drags Elizabeth's body into the hidden room created in the bathroom, the only light available when the door is open. As she shuts the door on Elizabeth, the screen fades to black. Stage lights flick on, illuminating Sue's body on the set of her new show, the show that replaced Elizabeth's workout show. The movements of the characters and the camera shots are more sexual than they were for Elizabeth's show, displaying the younger, hotter and more sexual appeal of Sue. In comparison to the set of Elizabeth's show, the set of Sue's show is more open, larger, with more backup dancers and lighting. However, the set still creates unease, with the bright white setting that many of the scenes have shown in diverse ways. The bright, clean white represents the fresh, untouched, perhaps pure Sue, in comparison to the older, less fresh Elizabeth. The editing and shots are different too, with faster paced, busier shots than Elizabeth's show. This again represents how Sue is the new hot thing and how everyone wants to be involved. After filming, Sue then walks through the same hallway as Elizabeth, the walls now beginning to be filled with images of her. The hall is still empty and vast, with shots still lasting around 10 seconds as she walks down it. Yet, the hall still feels claustrophobic and tight, despite knowing logically it isn't. Cutting from Sue's vibrant nightlife, we are shown the apartment, empty of Elizabeth's things and of personal touches. The lighting is dim and the location is dull, showing to the audience that without Sue, life itself is dull and devoid of anything bright and fun. Back in the apartment, Sue stumbles through the hallway towards the bathroom, her body slowly collapsing as her time runs out before the switch must happen. The editing is more erratic too, lights blurring and shots switching quickly and messily. After switching, Elizabeth awakens and begins exploring the apartment. She looks around at the mess left from Sue's night, with alcohol bottles strewn across the apartment, making it seem more lived in as the movie progresses, and as Sue becomes her own individual, rather than a part of Elizabeth. Due to the night before, with Sue extending her time in control by an extra night despite being told not to, Elizabeth begins noticing changes to herself, such as an accelerated aging to her body due to Sue's irresponsibility. As Elizabeth calls for help, she is reminded how there is no
she and you are one.
And to
respect the balance,
reiterating that Sue and Elizabeth are one person, yet the audience begins to think differently. Elizabeth becomes enraged by the popularity of Sue on TV and by the neighbour. She becomes jealous of the youth and beauty that Sue has, knowing her time in the televised public view is behind her, despite her and Sue being one. Elizabeth's movements become more erratic, quickened. Unlike Sue's that were shown in an artistic way, Elizabeth's are shown with unsettling close-ups, with eerie humming tones played in the background. The music then becomes heavy, deep bass tones as Elizabeth begins running through the streets, constantly watching her back. After preparing for a dinner with an old friend, Elizabeth looks over Sue's unconscious body, then at a large billboard of Sue. She becomes angry and jealous of Sue's young, sexual body. Elizabeth stares at herself in the mirror, her tough exterior slowly breaking down as she tries to conceal the signs of her aging. She becomes more frantic, maddened by the watchful eye of Sue's billboard. Eventually, Elizabeth breaks down. Staring at herself in the bathroom mirror, she smudges and tries to remove her makeup, her psyche cracking and unleashing the anger that she bottled up inside.
It was difficult. Emotionally, that idea that I think many of us have been where we're trying to make something better and then we just keep making it worse. For me, it's one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the whole film.
The scene cuts to Elizabeth in a bathrobe, ignoring the messages from the friend she was supposed to be meeting. She sits in her dim bedroom, staring into nothingness as the light from the window lowly lights her face. Returning to Sue, her own psyche begins collapsing, and she becomes stressed by the pressure of being a star. Within a dream, Sue believes that she removes a chicken leg from her body, showing the deep connection between her and Elizabeth. Upon waking up, Sue discovers the apartment in disarray with food waste around. As she quickly walks to the studio, we hear a phone call with the Substance phone line, where Sue becomes enraged as she's reminded that
there is no she and you,
and ends the call. As she enters the studio, she sees the show has been cancelled and the set has begun to be deconstructed. She rushes to the manager's office and stands there panicked, this evident by the close-up camera shots and the droning tones of the music. Upon discovering they want her on a bigger show, the music begins with higher tones, creating the uplifting, somewhat angelic feeling displayed to the audience. This marks a larger turning point for Sue, her selfishness and need to be in the spotlight overtaking her logic for the rules. She begins extending her days in control, going past the 7 days before the switch. With this, she is taking from Elizabeth, causing her body to deteriorate and age faster than usual. To maintain her life as Sue, she must collect stabilizer fluid, a liquid collected from within Elizabeth's spine. When the separation began, the fluid was clear, pure, but as Sue then extends her days and takes more fluid than recommended, it becomes cloudy and darker, unpure. This shows the corrupting Sue, her selfishness overtaking the purity she once had. This then leads to a scene in reference to American Beauty 1999. Sue lays on the bed, basking in her own beauty and power. The shot type, angle and positioning of Sue is reminiscent of the cover of American Beauty. This, of course, could be a coincidence, just showing the power, beauty and sexuality of Sue, but the shot is extremely similar to the poster. As Elizabeth awakens, she screams in pain and anger. The reasoning not yet revealed to the viewer. The music is again heavy and grungy. It quickly cuts to Elizabeth in the shower, the shot shaking and Elizabeth moving erratically trying to scrub away the damage that Sue caused. It's then revealed what has happened. Her body aged and distorted due to Sue taking away this stabilizer fluid, which could represent the gift of life, youth and beauty. Elizabeth's face is more wrinkled, with grey frazzled hair falling in it. She quickly calls the substance phone line, yelling that
she didn't respect the balance,
and is given a choice to destroy Sue but not gain back what has been given to her, or continue living with Sue and deal with what happens. She chooses to continue living this separated life, perhaps blind with envy of Sue, despite it now becoming more evident that Sue may be her own separate being and not part of Elizabeth. Her body begins to grow old and immobile, furthering the feeling that Elizabeth is not in control of herself or Sue. Scenes cut between Sue on a television interview and Elizabeth cooking a meal to eat alone. Elizabeth's descent to madness is evident with her cooking, the making of meals too big for just one person to consume. Her movements are erratic and pans clang as she mimics what Sue says on TV. With the mention of her name, Elizabeth quickly spins around to see the TV. As Sue badmouths Elizabeth on TV, she eviscerates a turkey in a brutal way, perhaps showing her anger towards Sue unleashed. The apartment becomes more lived in, being destroyed by Elizabeth's anger. With splattered eggs and newspapers, Elizabeth begins covering the windows, hiding the large screen displaying the outside world. She encloses herself within the apartment, delving deeper into madness as her mind collapses more due to her intense jealousy of Sue. With the next time Sue awakens, she's met with the intense mess of the apartment. Food waste thrown around the kitchen and living room, and the erratic plastering of newspapers over the window and TV. The more Elizabeth descends into madness, the angrier Sue becomes, and therefore neither of them respect the balance. In retaliation, Sue begins collecting more stabilizer fluid, keeping it in jars to only assume that she will live more than the 7 days before switching. The fluid becomes cloudier, more corrupt, more impure. With the time jump to 3 months later, we are met with the preparations for the New Year's Eve show that Sue is hosting. She looks out of the now cleaned window at the billboard, mimicking the way Elizabeth looked at the billboard of Sue earlier in the film. Looking around the apartment, it is obvious that Sue has changed it, making it personal to her rather than Elizabeth, despite them being the same person. It's assumed that over the 3-month time jump that Sue has remained being in control, using the stored stabilizer to live off. This is evident by the amount of packaged food in the hidden room that was used to feed the unconscious body. However, the stabilizer has now become more corrupt, a black and yellow liquid unusable by Sue to survive. As she calls the substance phone line, she is told
It means you've reached the end.
and must switch back to Elizabeth to begin creating more fluid. Sue's body begins decaying, becoming stiff and bleeding from her nose as she goes to switch. This then returns us to Elizabeth, even more decayed than before. It begins with her wrinkled feet stepping from the hidden room, intercut with Sue's boyfriend, I assume, walking to the bathroom to see if Sue needs any help. We are then met with a shot of Elizabeth holding the door closed. The camera pans over Elizabeth's body, showing every wrinkle and sag of her skin, then showing her face, distorted from what it once was. Her hair is now completely gone, her spine hunched and evident through her thin skin, and her teeth decayed. In anger, Elizabeth slams against the bathroom door, yelling for Sue's boyfriend to leave. The shot and angle of Elizabeth is similar to a shot from The Shining, a film that was referenced before. In The Shining, it shows the patriarch of the family, played by Jack Nicholson, banging against a door in anger, trying to reach his family to kill them. In comparison, the scene in The Substance shows Elizabeth trying to alienate Sue from her relationship due to her selfishness, and the detrimental effect it's having on her and her body. Elizabeth tries running through the hallway, her fragile and old bones stiffening and cracking as she tries to move. She calls the phone line, begging to stop the experiment and put an end to her worsening condition. After dragging her portrait back into the living room, Elizabeth admires it, admiring herself to what she once was, now ruined by Sue's selfishness and lack of care for the rules. She retrieves the final kit, preparing to kill Sue and end the experiment. The shots are more erratic, shakier and unfocused. Elizabeth stands over Sue's unconscious body. As she prepares to inject the Terminator, Elizabeth has second thoughts, not finishing the injection and keeping Sue alive because she needs her. Elizabeth tries to switch back, in need of Sue. Sue springs to consciousness, despite Elizabeth also being conscious. This shows the final separation between the two beings, not one, but now the two separate, Elizabeth and Sue. They stare at each other, Sue showing youth, beauty and popularity, and Elizabeth showing the old, decayed form that was caused by Sue. In realising Elizabeth planned to kill Sue, she becomes enraged, attacking her with a superhuman-like strength. Sue begins smashing Elizabeth's face into a mirror, further ruining her looks. As a blood-covered Elizabeth crawls through the apartment, Sue stands over her body, enraged. Sue begins kicking her, injuring Elizabeth more and covering Sue's face in blood, reminiscent of a scene from Carrie 1976, which will be mentioned later. She looks down at the now dead Elizabeth, finally realising the consequences of her actions, that her only source of survival is now dead. Within the studio, we are shown close-ups of Sue's face as she walks, the sound fading in and out as a ringing sound is heard, what was heard before when Sue had to stabilise. The sound continues to distort as Sue begins coughing and eventually coughing up blood and a tooth, showing how, without Elizabeth, Sue will slowly cease to exist. She stares into a mirror, crying and panicking as she begins pulling her teeth out. Her eyes widen with craze as she continues to remove more teeth. She screams silently as she coughs up more blood and then comes to a realisation. She thinks back to the substance activator and how you can create a better version of yourself. In rushing to leave, she is called by her manager for an introduction with the shareholders of the show. In shaky, panicked close-ups, she's told to smile, a phrase that men tend to tell women as a way to control them. Her nails begin to peel from her fingers and her ear falls off, furthering the intense body horror of the film. She runs home, her vision blurred by tears and blood, and the shots extremely shaky and erratic. She reaches home and finds the activator, and despite it being single use, she uses it. This then births the creature known as Monstro Elizasu. A mess of body parts in the wrong places, and a physical representation of Sue's selfishness and Elizabeth's anger culminated into one being, a creature made from pure rage and envy. Monstro Elizasu is similar visually to Bilal Bradley, a deformed twin from the movie Basket Case 1983, with the unnatural body and stretched flesh. Additionally, Monstro, as I will call her for short, is like a scene from Society 1989, in which many people's bodies combine into one one grotesque monster amalgamated from many with odd proportions and an unnatural amount of body parts. As a small note, Monstro was done mostly practical, with only Elizabeth's screaming face added digitally, according to Daniel Welsh of Huffington Post. Monstro gazes out of the window at the billboard of Sue, like how both Elizabeth and Sue did earlier, showing how she is a combination of both. Upon entering the studio, Monstro walks down the hallway, surrounded by applauding people. This is then shown to be a hallucination, a result of the collapse of Monstro's mind, in doing anything to become perfect, beautiful, and popular in the public eye. And as the crowd fades, we see the empty hallway. The next scene begins like many others, with the bright stage light illuminating the darkness. Monstro slowly moves her way into the light, standing at the microphone. This scene is reminiscent of a scene from Carrie, like mentioned before, where Carrie is on the stage accepting her role as prom queen, whereas in The Substance, Monstro is stood on stage, ready to accept her role as host of the show. As she tries to speak, it's mumbled and deep and barely audible. Her mask of Elizabeth falls from her face, revealing her true identity to the audience. The crowd becomes disgusted at her appearance and begins screaming, causing the crew to attack and eventually destroy Monstro's head. However, this isn't the end, as another head emerges in its place and Monstro's body begins to fall apart, perhaps revealing what happens if the other selves aren't stabilised. The editing and sound are loud, manic and choppy, showing the true mental state of both Monstro and the crowd. She spins in circles, spraying blood into the crowd and basking in the light of the stage. Walking through the halls, she sprays the walls with blood, covering the pictures of Sue and illuminating everything with a red glow. Monstro stumbles out into the streets, her body still falling apart until she falls to the ground, her body exploding into a mess of parts. The only living part left is the face of Elizabeth from Monstro's back. She somehow makes her way to the Elizabeth Sparkle star on the Walk of Fame, and glitter falls on her, the way the glitter fell in Elizabeth's snow globe. In the end, Monstro accepts herself as she is, monstrous body and all, and finally revels in the media spotlight that Elizabeth and Sue always wanted, eventually melting and dying on Elizabeth's Hollywood star, mimicking the scene from the beginning. And by the next morning, a cleaner comes and washes away the remains of Monstro from the star, bringing an end to the story of Elizabeth, Sue, and Monstro Eliza Sue. This brings an end to my analysis on The Substance and the collapse of a mind due to a demanding industry. Remember,
You are one.
Take care of yourself.